When the smoke cleared and the dust settled, the world didn't heal, it bled red for years to come. In my last video, I covered the brutal history of the 4 corporate wars, the battles that shattered the old world and shaped the dystopian future of Cyberpunk Red. If you haven't watched that yet, check it out so you can understand how the world got this broken. But today, we're moving forward. This video is all about what came next, the aftermath of the 4th corporate war. We're going to look at how the war's fallout transformed everything. This era is known as the time of the Red. So the aftermath of the 4th corporate war wasn't only political or economic, it was environmental as well. When Arasaka Tower was nuked in Night City, the explosion didn't just flatten a city block, the blast threw massive amounts of radioactive debris into the atmosphere. Combine that with the constant orbital strikes, continent-wide firestorms, and cities being bombed into oblivion, and you get a sky choked with death. For nearly 2 years, the skies around the world were stained with a permanent red, pale, and eerie, bloody haze that turned every sunrise and sunset into a hellish glow. When the rain came, it brought down that toxic red dust, coating everything in a greasy, rust-colored slime. And people called these the blood rains. Even as the atmosphere slowly cleared over the next decade, the name, the time of the Red, stuck. It marks the early years of post-war recovery, a time when survivors struggled to rebuild their shattered cities and economies while living under that oppressive crimson sky. By the time the 4th corporate war ended, the United States was united only in name. The country had already been falling apart for decades, but the war finished the job. What was left was a patchwork of disconnected territories, each dealing with the chaos in their own way. On the East Coast, Washington, D.C. and the surrounding regions held on as a civilized government zone. This area was known as Boss Wash. It's basically from Boston to Washington, and it became the beating heart of what little remained of federal authority. Here, the government still functioned, at least in theory, keeping order with whatever military resources they had left. But everything west of the Mississippi, that was a different story. Out there, the Wild West was reborn, a mess of independent territories where local warlords, militias, and mercenary armies maintained control. In these regions, small-time factions ruled their own slices of land, maintaining power through alliances, brute force, or sheer ruthlessness. Even the government branches, like legislative, executive, and judicial, still existed, but they had little to no influence beyond the East. The further west you went, the less their laws mattered, which meant Night City, located on the border between North and South California on the Pacific coast of North America, was very much outside the bounds of the law. Corporations, private armies, and local militias all filled the power vacuum, fighting to carve out their own micro-kingdoms. In this fragmented America, survival meant being connected to the right gang, corporation, or militia. The age of centralized power was over at this point. There was, however, one person who held the fragile remains of the United States together, and that was President Elizabeth Cress. She was a hardline ex-military leader. She stayed in power by ignoring term limits and sheer necessity. Cress nationalized Militech, forced out Arasaka, and kept control of the Boss Wash corridor, but the US was no longer a superpower. Its military splintered into combined operations groups, or COGs, which are small task forces meant to protect key interests. Many of those COGs eventually went rogue, turning into mercenary armies, private enforcers, or raider gangs. In the time of the Red, the US wasn't leading the world anymore, it was just trying to survive. So let's talk a little bit more about Night City. It definitely should have been a dead zone. After the nuclear detonation at Arasaka Tower in 2023, the city's heart was reduced to rubble. 500,000 people died, and radioactive fallout poisoned the area. But Night City refused to die. Thanks to its location, infrastructure, and sheer necessity, it became a magnet for nomads, edgerunners, and survivors looking to rebuild. Piece by piece, Night City began to rise from the ashes. Not as a shining metropolis, but as a free city-state independent of both the shattered US government and the megacorps that had once fought over it. Night City's rebirth was fueled by trade, tech salvage, and good old-fashioned grit. It became a hub for independent operators, a place where deals were made and reputations were built. It wasn't clean, it wasn't safe, but it was free. Meanwhile, further up and down the West Coast, the old U.S. territories fractured into a new alliance, the Pacifica Confederation. This loose coalition of city-states, free states, and independent enclaves included areas like Northern California, Oregon, and parts of Washington. While they cooperated on trade and defense, each member kept its sovereignty. The Pacifica Confederation was born out of necessity. Nobody wanted the federal government or megacorps calling the shots again. Together, Night City and the Pacifica Confederation represented a new way of surviving in the post-war world. Self-reliant, decentralized, and fiercely independent. And from this birthed a new type of power balance. The Pacifica Confederation emerged as a powerful, independent economic region after the war, controlling vital trade routes to Asia and backed by local military strength. While President Cress's new United States tries to bring them into the fold, Pacifica prefers to keep its autonomy, working with the federal government only on its own terms. They also keep the megacorps in check, making it clear that any corporate outreach will be met with force. In the time of the Red, the Pacifica Confed plays its own game, balancing between economic power and military independence. Everyone knows you don't mess with the locals here. Okay, so what about the broader global landscape in the time of the Red? First, we have United Europe. Europe remains politically stable through economic institutions, but weakened after losing space assets and struggling with internal unrest. Then we have neo-Soviet Russia. Russia is ruled by ruthless oligarchs acting like megacorp executives, using corruption and violence to maintain power. The Middle East. Much of the Middle East is a radioactive wasteland at this point, with surviving nations forming alliances to resist foreign exploitation. We have futurist Africa. Africa is backed by its High Rider space colonies, has developed some of the world's most advanced cities, and it's free from external control. Central and South America. South America's rising OAS rivals global powers, while Central America unified after expelling most U.S. influence except the Panama Canal. Asia and the Far East. Asia struggles with post-war recovery, corporate collapse, and regional instability, far from its former economic dominance. The Drift Nations. So the Drift Nations are floating cities, once corporate-owned platforms and improvised shantytowns that declared independence after the Fourth Corporate War. Now they survive as sovereign microstates, living off trade, salvage, piracy, and deals with nomad fleets, far from the reach of traditional governments. Then we have the Deep Down. So the Deep Down refers to a secret network of underwater domes and deep sea colonies that cut themselves off from the surface to survive the war. Isolated and self-sufficient, they're only now cautiously reconnecting with surface factions like the Drift Nations and Nomads, while staying distrustful of corporate and government interference. The High Rider Confederation. So the High Rider Confederation is a coalition of space colonists, mainly descendants of Pan-African workers who seized control of orbital stations during the 7-Hour War and declared their independence. Today, they control Earth's orbit, acting as a powerful but neutral force that keeps Earth-bound nations and corporations in check. Okay, so what happened with all the corporate power in the time of the Red? The Fourth Corporate War shattered the age of mega-corporate dominance. Global networks collapsed, transport systems failed, and even corps uninvolved in fighting suffered crippling collateral damage. But the megacorps didn't die. Local and regional branches kept going, often rebranding themselves, scavenging resources, and maintaining their original services where possible. They became smaller, scrappier, but definitely still dangerous. Though they lost their global empires, these neocorps are even more ruthless now. In the lawless time of the Red, they rely on covert ops, bribery, and corporate blackmail instead of massive armies. The competition is cutthroat, and even small-time edgerunners can challenge old corporations or start their own. It's open season in the corporate battlefield, and everyone plays dirty. Inside a corporation, it's still business as usual, if business means a constant power struggle. Starting as a junior executive, you claw your way up by managing projects, then departments, until you hit the cutthroat manager tier. Above that, assistant VPs, and division heads fight viciously for control, climbing towards the coveted executive floors. At the top sits the executive VP, who runs the corporation's day-to-day, answering only to the president and the board of directors. In theory, promotions are merit-based. In reality, it's all about nepotism, backroom deals, and corporate sabotage. Cheating, blackmail, and extortion aren't risks, they're strategies. Every exec has a personal team, which is a squad of solos, netrunners, techs, and fixers who do their dirty work. Espionage, sabotage, extractions, even assassinations. This is how corporate power is really built and maintained. Think of these teams as deniable assets with corporate salaries. Why would anyone stay loyal in this blood sport? The answer is privilege. Free housing, luxury lifestyles, cyberware perks, and the illusion of power keep corporate operatives chained to their jobs. But step out of line and those perks disappear really fast. The higher you climb, the tighter the noose gets. In the time of the Red, no corporation is safe. Old giants teeter on the edge, while upstart baby corps fight for market share with street-level ruthlessness. Alliances are temporary, betrayals are inevitable, and fortunes rise and fall overnight. Corporate warfare hasn't ended, it's just evolved. With networks shattered, corporate power is now personal. Your name, your reputation, your face, these are your weapons. Charismatic fixers and public-facing execs are new power brokers, skilling deals in person, while corps fight to control their public image. The future belongs to those who can win the face-to-face game. So that wraps up our look at the aftermath of the Fourth Corporate War and how the Neocorps rose from the rubble. The world of Cyberpunk Red is built on the wreckage of the old corporate empires, but make no mistake, the game is still being played, just with new rules and nastier players. In my next videos, I will be diving into the major corporate power players still shaping the world in 2045, and a deep dive into Night City itself. So make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss when they're released. The time of the Red is just getting started. Thank you for watching. Bye!